The question that I was tasked with answering in this presentation is, what contribution am I trying to make to practical theology in a British context? And my answer to that question is this short presentation, which I've entitled Missional Pastoral Care, Ministry Defined from the Ground Up. So practical theology is necessarily interdisciplinary, which makes it a useful framework, I think, for the complexities of urban mission. So my research was with team members of the Eden Network, a national and newly international network of incarnational mission teams placed in local churches or church plants in urban communities identified as among the most deprived in the country. I also interviewed community members who had met Eden teams in their neighbourhoods. I wanted to understand what was happening in the relationship between Eden teams and community members and whether it could be understood as transformative. I think a function of practical theology is to make audible voices obscured by organisational hierarchies and class differences. And in this research, I was asking who defines ministry, the organisations and denominations who plan and recruit, the practitioners, or the recipients of that ministry. I prioritised the perspectives of Eden teams and community members, an approach which also is evident in Beverly Skeggs' work. She does ethnographic exploration of working class women's experience, and she acknowledges the liberative potential of attending to experience, allowing those traditionally objectified to tell their stories. I think a focus on lived experience is particularly apposite to the study of evangelicalism, in which the traditional conceptions of religious identity have been abstracted from ordinary evangelicals. By inviting Eden team members to share their ministry experiences, I addressed the theological and organisational superstructures of evangelicalism from the perspective of ordinary practitioners. Furthermore, by drawing on the experiences of urban community members, I enable the working class recipients of middle class evangelical mission to define it for themselves, undermining the power relations inherent in social class and between missioner and missionised. My research was driven by a question: what is transformation? And I suggest that transformation language is a corporate discourse within the Eden Network, which acts as an interpretive framework, the position from which, in dialogue with tradition, we interpret the world. It's used by the Eden Network as a positive, pragmatic, catch-all kind of language to narrate aims and outcomes, while the nature of those outcomes is still emerging. While this might create space in which to experiment and provide reassurance in uncertainty, I argue that when attention isn't given to understanding the experiences that lie beneath transformation discourse, it becomes unhelpful, as seen in Eden team member Sally's expression of confusion and disappointment. And she said, "I don't know, it's a hard thing. I think your expectation is different, isn't it? So you may have a hope that they're just totally going to understand everything you're telling them and that they're going to wake up tomorrow morning and they'll be praying in tongues and laying on hands and healing people and everything like that. But actually, in reality, my faith is just not big enough to believe for that. So I'll just be happy for somebody who maybe decides not to get up in the morning and have a glass of wine for breakfast." This use of transformation language, combined with a lack of awareness of inherited missional narratives and the failure to reflect on them in the light of urban practice, has exacerbated the destabilisation felt by Eden teams in their urban ministry, and has led to the dissonance between reality and the narrative being interpreted as failure. So what actually is happening in the activity of Eden team members, according to their and urban community members' perspectives? So informed by an evangelical missional narrative, the Eden Network conceives of its work as urban mission, primarily understood as sharing the Christian message in words and actions. However, their stories demonstrate activity and impact beyond their understanding and expectation for mission. Their ministry involves faith sharing, but is not focused primarily on verbal evangelism. Further, it includes social action in supporting vulnerable people, but that action is not instrumentalised as a means to the end of evangelism. And while it often includes conversion, this is not the sole aim. Therefore, I understand this emerging ministry practice as a new mode of missional living, which I call missional pastoral care, an activity which enacts the mission of God in three specific ways: in a holistic sharing of life for the good of one another, in an articulation of life narratives, including faith narratives, and in hermeneutical play, reshaping the meaning systems of all involved. Missional pastoral care accounts for the holistic understanding of mission in the practices of Eden teams, alongside an emphasis on meaning making through relationships. In the stories of my participants, it's evident that these relationships are shaped by 7 constituent elements: difference, locality, availability, practicality, long-term commitment, consistency, and love. So the differences between Eden teams and community members challenge perspectives, creating awareness of alternative ways of being. As described by community member Claire, who talked about her estate's culture of drug taking and then said, "I think going to church helped me to think that this is not all of you. You don't have to be like this to be cool, to be good." This difference is experienced close at hand through locality, as Eden team members focus on a relatively small and defined geographical area, prioritising time in the local community and using local facilities. Alongside locality is availability, an intentionally open orientation rather than a lack of boundaries, which changes over time and according to circumstances, but maintains a commitment to hospitality and a willingness to engage. This model is fundamentally practical, involving the action of both Eden team members and community members in programmed diversionary activity or more informal friendships. It subverts a person's belief about themselves by enacting a different story. As Eden team member Louise described, "I remember one woman who comes from quite a large family. When I met with her, she'd talk a lot and I would listen a lot. And I'd be aware that she wasn't good at listening, but sometimes I'll be there and they'll all be together and they'll all be talking at one another, which made me think that when I meet up with her in the week, even if she has just 20 minutes or an hour of someone giving her attention and listening to what she has to say and caring, that could be quite a big thing." This involves long-term commitment and consistency, building trust and allowing for the length of time it takes for people and relationships to grow. Finally, love in the context of missional pastoral care is shown as an affirmation of the sense of self of each individual. People talked about feeling accepted, actually more themselves, even as they described changing. They talked about staying the same. Community member Jess from Yorkshire said, "You just feel better about yourself, and half the time you're like, I can do that," like they inspire you to do stuff. This affirmation of the sense of self of each individual, which allows them to stay the same as they change, is the way in which love is shown in missional pastoral care relationships. And as this kind of loving affirmation comes alongside the challenge of difference in the course of daily informal relationships, chatting together and doing life together, change becomes possible. This understanding of how change happens is illuminated by the work of Charles Gherkin, who's dominated understandings of pastoral care since the 1980s. So Gherkin integrated insights from psychology with a Christian theological worldview and developed what he called narrative hermeneutical pastoral care. Gherkin argues that each person has a narrative meaning system which shapes what we understand to be true and which we use to interpret our experiences. For example, Claire, who I cited earlier, her perspective on what people who live on her estate have to do to be cool or good. Gherkin formulated pastoral care as a dynamic process in which meaning systems are challenged and changed by creating dialogical space between the Christian narrative and the life stories of individuals seeking help. This process involves the care seeker seeking a fusion of horizons of meaning and understanding with the care seeker, developing a shared language world in which both understand the other's meaning systems and can explore new potential meanings through a process he called hermeneutical play. Gherkin's model of a fusion of horizons and hermeneutical play can be seen in the relationships between Eden team members and community members, in which it serves the same end of meaning making. Although my research extends his understanding of pastoral care in that it offers a non-professionalised, community-based and practice-oriented model. Gherkin draws on John Dominic Crossan's understanding of parable as a form of language which plays the role as subverting accepted meanings in constructed worlds. He describes the pastoral counsellor as a parabolic figure, changing the mythic world from inside by means of subverting it, giving it a new twist so that a fresh possibility is opened. In missional pastoral care, the relationships themselves are parabolic, with both community members and Eden team members experiencing the subversion of life narratives through difference alongside a loving affirmation of the self. This results in the revising of meaning systems to acknowledge and account for the other's experience and the shared experience that's built through the course of the relationship. This research, I think, offers perspectives that might be renewed on pastoral care, on mission, and demonstrates an evolution, I think, in evangelical identity. So missional pastoral care suggests that the primary nature of pastoral care is actually meaning-making in the light of the Christian narrative. And it positions pastoral care as the substance of the mission of God. This enables pastoral care to move beyond problem-centeredness. It also sets care directly within the relationships and social forces which influence a person's life, preventing it from remaining introverted or individualistic. Furthermore, the integration of faith sharing with pastoral care offers an indication of the role of pastoral concern as part of holistic mission. My research offers to missiology an account of missional practice which is marked by relationships of mutuality. The change in meaning systems of both practitioners and recipients of mission, and an expectation of both flourishing and loss as the outcomes of mission. As such, I think it can provide guideposts for practitioners to clarify the missional task. By implementing the elements of missional pastoral care with an understanding of hermeneutical play, practitioners can enter into missional engagement with a fuller understanding of the kinds of behaviours which enable meaning-making to take place, and a realistic expectation for the process and its outcomes. Missional pastoral care as a model has to be seen as broadly emphasising evangelical priorities. Nevertheless, it does challenge conceptions of evangelical identity and highlights 4 distinctive features of the evangelical identity of Eden teams in contrast with other contemporary expressions of evangelical Christianity. Those are connection as motivation, a contextual approach, a practical theological paradigm, and a kingdom identity. These innovations in motivation, context, and theology combine to create an expression of evangelicalism which is not defined by a concern for its own identity, opening up different perspectives on the evangelical tradition and indicating that it might be developing in some new ways. In this research, I've enabled my community member participants to define the mission that they have received along with Eden team members. This is a departure from top-down models of mission in which practitioners are trained to implement a defined model and the recipients are largely invisible in the process. What has become evident in the experiences of Eden teams is that recipients of mission are not invisible or passive. While some models of mission may tend towards objectification, this is challenged by the experience of long-term practitioners who have to contend with the responses of so-called recipients, whether they choose to or not. My research has shown that in order to engage in meaning-making, a relationship must be developed that is mutual, which involves difference and which is defined by a loving affirmation of the other. This suggests that models of mission which seek transformation but fail to enable this kind of relationship will not significantly impact the meaning system of the missionized other. It also indicates the importance of hearing the perspectives of recipients of mission in order to understand the nature and effects of missional activity. In this conception of mission, both practitioners and recipients are changed in the process of their relationships, making the categories of practitioner and recipient redundant in the building of mutual communities of care, which are a foretaste of the kingdom of God. In conclusion, my research indicates that practical theology can afford to confidently adopt a liberative focus, intentionally speaking back to denominational and subcultural structures of religious identity and spirituality. It also demonstrates the necessary relationship between sociology of religion and practical theology, as the insights gleaned through sociological methods of inquiry contribute both to understandings of religion as a phenomenon and to the lives of religious practitioners, reflections of denominations, and the self-understandings of faith communities. Amen.
Brilliant.